Why do you keep ending up with the same kind of woman, even when you promised yourself you'd never repeat that mistake again? It's a question that feels heavy because deep down you already know the answer. You're not choosing her, you're choosing a pattern, a familiar feeling, a wound you never healed. And that realization stings because it forces you to confront something you've avoided for years, the truth that your heart has been making decisions your mind never approved. You're not failing, you're repeating, and repetition is the mind's way of trying to resolve what was never understood. You keep choosing the wrong women because the emotional blueprint inside you hasn't changed. It leads you back to the same dynamic, the same energy, the same pain, because the brain feels safer in familiarity than in the unknown, even if that familiarity hurts you every time. Maybe you've asked yourself why you ignore the signs, why you overlook disrespect, why you chase someone who makes you feel anxious, uncertain, or unseen. You tell yourself you're giving chances, staying patient, or being loyal, but the truth is simpler. Part of you is starving for something you don't know how to give yourself. Validation, attention, acceptance, a sense of worth. And when a woman appears who triggers those emotional cravings, you attach fast, even if she's not good for you. And that's exactly why this message matters. Because once you understand the pattern, you can finally break it. Once you shine a light on what has been unconscious, you gain control over what you attract and what you allow. This isn't about blaming women. This is about reclaiming your power. The power to see clearly, the power to choose differently, the power to stop confusing emotional hunger with genuine connection. You're here because something inside you knows it's time to change. You're tired of feeling drained, tired of giving more than you get, tired of chasing someone who doesn't meet you halfway, tired of confusing chaos with chemistry. And you're ready to understand why it keeps happening so you can finally put an end to it. Stay with this message because the deeper we go, the more clarity you're going to gain. You're going to see what drives your attraction, what blinds your judgment, and what keeps pulling you into the arms of the wrong women. You're going to learn how to shift from desperation to self-respect, from chasing attention to choosing alignment, from emotional survival to emotional strength. And when that shift happens, your entire life changes, your relationships change, your confidence changes, your standards change. The woman you choose and the woman who chooses you changes. This is your chance to stop repeating history. This is your chance to break the cycle that has cost you peace, time, and self-worth. This is your moment to step into clarity, to step into strength, and to step into the version of yourself who no longer settles for temporary excitement that leads to long-term pain. If you stay with this message until the end, you won't just understand why you choose the wrong women. You'll understand how to finally choose right. And that shift will transform everything. You don't choose the wrong women because you're weak. You choose them because a part of you is still chasing a feeling you never fully understood. Attraction isn't random. It's rooted in the emotional wiring formed years before you met the people you've given your heart to. And when that wiring is shaped by instability, rejection, or inconsistency, your heart learns to crave what your mind knows is destructive. That's why certain women pull you in so fast, not because they're right for you, but because they match the emotional frequency you've been unconsciously carrying. You feel drawn to intensity because it mirrors the chaos you once normalized. You mistake emotional highs and lows for passion because stability feels unfamiliar. You confuse the thrill of uncertainty with the comfort of real connection because your nervous system was trained to equate love with tension. And when someone finally gives you the same emotional pattern you grew up around, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like home, even if that home is the reason you're hurting. This is the truth most men never hear. You're not attracted to her. You're attracted to the part of yourself that still craves healing. And until that craving is understood, it will keep pulling you toward women who trigger your wounds instead of those who support your growth. That's why you ignore red flags. That's why you hold on to potential instead of reality. That's why you chase someone who makes you feel small, unseen, or unsure. You're not chasing her. You're chasing the chance to rewrite a pain you never resolved. But here's the powerful part. You're not trapped in this pattern. Attraction is not fate. It's conditioning. And conditioning can be rewritten. When you start valuing peace over chaos, your desires shift. When you learn to calm your own mind, emotional games stop impressing you. When you build self-respect, inconsistency becomes repulsive. When you strengthen your boundaries, manipulation loses its grip. And when you align with your true worth, the wrong women stop feeling magnetic. You begin to see the difference between connection and attachment. You begin to understand that real compatibility feels safe, steady, and clear, not dramatic, unpredictable, or painful. You begin to realize that the women you thought were exciting were only stimulating your unhealed parts, and the women you overlooked were the ones who could have brought you peace. This is where your power lies, not in avoiding women, but in understanding yourself. The more you understand your own emotional patterns, the less control they have over you. The more honest you are about your wounds, the harder it becomes for those wounds to make decisions for you. And the moment you take ownership of your inner world, your outer world begins to transform. Imagine what happens when you stop seeking validation, when you stop needing someone to fill emotional gaps you never addressed, when you stop running from your own emptiness and start building a foundation from the inside out. You become a man who chooses out of clarity, not fear. A man who sees through the surface, a man who feels grounded enough to walk away from anything that threatens his peace, a man who doesn't chase intensity because he understands that consistency is the real sign of emotional security. And when you reach that level, you no longer wonder why you used to choose the wrong women. You understand exactly why it happened and exactly why it will never happen again. There's a moment when you finally see what you've been avoiding, and it hits you harder than any heartbreak ever could. You realize the red flags weren't hidden. They were right there, glowing in front of you. The inconsistency, the manipulation, the emotional high one day and disconnect the next, the way she made you question your worth instead of helping you rise into it. None of it was subtle. You just didn't want to face what acknowledging them would mean. Because seeing the truth would force you to confront the gap between the love you wanted and the love you accepted. You didn't ignore red flags because you were blind. You ignored them because part of you was afraid of what would happen if you walked away. Afraid of being alone, afraid you wouldn't find better, afraid that leaving would confirm the deep fear that you weren't worth more. And fear is powerful. Fear convinces you to stay when every part of your soul is begging you to go. Fear convinces you that temporary affection is better than the emptiness you feel inside. Fear convinces you to cling to potential because the present isn't giving you what you deserve. But the painful truth is this: every time you overlook a red flag, you abandon yourself. You silence your intuition, you shrink your standards, you negotiate your peace, and you teach your heart that disrespect is acceptable as long as it doesn't leave you alone. That's how cycles repeat. Not because the signs aren't there, but because you've become conditioned to tolerate what should have been rejected the first time it appeared. Every red flag is a message from your future self, a warning that the path you're walking will not lead to the love, stability, or respect you desire, a signal that you're being pulled into a story that will drain you more than it will grow you. And when you listen to those warnings, you take back the power you've been giving away. The reason red flags feel easy to ignore is because desire speaks louder than truth when you're emotionally hungry. You look at her potential instead of her patterns. You focus on the moments she's sweet, not the patterns that show she's inconsistent. You rationalize the disrespect because you're afraid to lose the connection. But connection without respect is not love. Attention without effort is not commitment. And chemistry without stability is not a foundation for your future. This is where everything shifts. When you stop judging women by their words and start evaluating them by their patterns, clarity hits you fast. When you stop looking at who she could be and start focusing on who she consistently is, the truth becomes undeniable. And when you stop letting fear dictate your choices, you finally see that walking away is not loss. It is liberation. You deserve a woman whose actions match her promises. A woman who brings peace, not emotional chaos. A woman who stands by her word instead of shifting it whenever it benefits her. And you will start attracting that woman the moment you honor your own boundaries. Red flags don't exist to scare you. They exist to protect you. They exist to remind you of your worth. They exist to guide you towards something healthier, stronger, and more aligned with the man you are becoming. And once you begin trusting those signals, you stop falling for the wrong women. Not because you were trying harder, but because you finally value your own peace more than temporary emotions. There comes a point where you realize that protecting your peace requires more than noticing red flags. It requires building a version of yourself that refuses to negotiate your value. You don't rise by avoiding the wrong women. You rise by defining the standards that make the wrong women remove themselves from your life. And that begins with understanding that boundaries are not walls. They are the framework that keeps your life aligned with your worth. You spent too long hoping someone would treat you better, too long believing that loyalty would inspire change, too long thinking that if you showed enough patience, enough effort, enough understanding, she would eventually rise to meet your love. But standards don't manifest through hope. They manifest through self-respect, through the courage to say, this is who I am, this is what I expect, and this is what I will no longer tolerate. Strong standards don't make you difficult. They make you clear. And clarity is what protects you from falling into situations that drain your spirit. When you don't have standards, you end up accepting behavior that chips away at your confidence. You let inconsistency slide. You excuse disrespect. You let emotional games continue because you fear being seen as demanding. But the truth is, the more you shrink your boundaries, the more you lose pieces of yourself. And no relationship is worth that cost. Boundaries are not meant to push people away. They're meant to filter out those who are not aligned with the life you're building. When your standards are weak, you attract chaos. When your standards rise, chaos no longer has access to you. You stop engaging with people who depend on your lack of boundaries to remain in your life. You stop giving energy to women who only show up when it's convenient for them. And you stop confusing attention with consistency. A man with boundaries becomes a man who moves with intention. He no longer entertains situations that drain him. He no longer chases validation because he knows his value is not determined by someone else's approval. He no longer sacrifices his peace just to avoid loneliness. Instead, he becomes someone who chooses his environment carefully, who protects his energy fiercely, and who understands that the wrong person will never match the standards that were built to protect him. When you rebuild your standards, you begin to value what you offer. You realize that a woman who truly respects you will never push you to compromise your dignity. She will not test your boundaries to see how much she can get away with. She will not make you question your self-worth. Instead, she will appreciate the structure you bring. She will respect the man you are. She will show consistency because she understands the level of man she's dealing with. And that's the shift that transforms your relationships. You stop choosing women based on chemistry alone. You start choosing women based on alignment. You choose from a place of strength instead of scarcity. You choose from a place of confidence instead of fear. You choose from a place of clarity instead of emotional chaos. The moment you honor your standards is the moment your entire love life changes. Because when you treat yourself like a man of value, the world reflects that back to you. The wrong women fall away. The right women step forward. And you finally understand that your boundaries are not limitations. They are the doorway to the life and love you truly deserve. When you finally understand your own standards, something shifts inside you. You begin to see that choosing the right woman has far less to do with intensity and far more to do with alignment. Peace becomes a priority. Stability becomes attractive. Consistency becomes magnetic. And the chaos you once tolerated suddenly feels foreign because your spirit has outgrown the version of you that accepted it. This is when you start choosing with clarity instead of emotion, with intention instead of impulse, and with self-respect instead of desperation. One of the greatest traps men fall into is believing that chemistry is enough. You feel a spark. You feel drawn to her energy. You feel the excitement, the rush, the anticipation. But chemistry without values is a fire that burns fast and leaves you empty. Chemistry without accountability is a cycle of highs and lows that exhausts you. Chemistry without character is a trap that feels good at first but destroys you slowly. You've lived that pattern long enough to know it doesn't lead anywhere worth staying. What truly matters is whether her values match where you're going, whether her mindset aligns with your growth, whether her actions reflect emotional maturity, whether her presence adds peace instead of stress. You're not looking for perfection. You're looking for alignment. Alignment with the man you're becoming. Alignment with the future you're building. Alignment with the life you want to live. The wrong women drain your energy. The right woman multiplies it. The wrong women demand your effort but offer no stability. The right woman meets you with reciprocity. The wrong women thrive in confusion. The right woman thrives in clarity. And the moment you begin to evaluate women based on their character rather than your emotional cravings, everything becomes easier. You no longer force connections. You no longer chase someone who makes you question your worth. You no longer waste time trying to make dysfunction feel like love. Choosing based on values means looking deeper than surface attraction. It means paying attention to how she treats people who can't give her anything. It means noticing how she handles conflict, stress, and accountability. It means observing whether she builds, supports, and adds, or whether she takes, drains, and destroys. It means choosing someone whose actions reveal integrity, not someone whose words create illusions. A woman with healthy values won't play games with your emotions. She won't weaponize silence, inconsistency, or manipulation. She won't punish you for having boundaries. She won't make you compete for her attention, like you're begging for something that should be naturally given. She will bring calm, not chaos, respect, not confusion, intention, not excuses. Because a woman with values doesn't just want attention. She wants partnership, growth, and truth. And the more you choose based on values, the stronger your life becomes. You stop getting distracted by temporary attraction. You stop falling for emotional intensity that leads nowhere. You stop settling for women who only offer pieces of their commitment. You begin to invest your time in someone whose life aligns with yours, whose vision doesn't contradict your purpose, and whose presence strengthens your emotional stability. This is how you break the cycle. Not by avoiding women, not by closing your heart, but by opening your eyes, by choosing from a place of wisdom instead of wounds, by valuing your purpose, your peace, and your future above temporary emotion. And when you live this way, you don't just find the right woman. You attract her naturally because your energy finally matches the relationship you are meant for. There comes a moment when you realize that choosing the right woman becomes effortless the moment you become the man who no longer entertains the wrong ones. Attraction changes when you change. Your standards rise when your self-respect rises. Your decisions sharpen when your purpose becomes clear. And the version of you that once accepted chaos, inconsistency, and emotional confusion begins to feel like a distant memory because you've grown into a man whose life cannot be accessed by anything that doesn't match his direction. You stop craving validation the moment you learn how to validate yourself. You stop chasing attention the moment you build a life filled with meaning. You stop seeking comfort in someone else the moment you create internal stability. This is the transformation that shifts your entire world. You stop choosing women out of loneliness and start choosing from strength. You stop choosing based on emotional wounds and start choosing from emotional maturity. And you stop falling for temporary affection because you've learned to generate your own sense of worth. A man rooted in purpose becomes naturally selective, not because he's arrogant, but because he understands what he's building. He knows that the wrong woman can derail him, distract him, and diminish him. He knows that his time, energy, and focus are sacred. He knows that the woman beside him will either elevate his life or complicate it. And when a man understands his mission, he becomes extremely intentional about who he allows near his heart. This is why personal growth is the foundation of choosing correctly. When you operate at a higher level, you no longer feel pulled toward women who operate from chaos. You no longer feel captivated by emotional instability. You no longer feel hypnotized by superficial attraction. You see through everything that once blinded you, and what used to impress you now feels small, immature, and unaligned with your path. The right woman is drawn to a man who knows who he is, a man with discipline, a man with emotional strength, a man who leads his life with direction instead of drifting through it. A man who respects himself enough to walk away from anything that threatens his peace. She senses the difference. She feels the stability. She is naturally pulled toward a man who stands firm in his identity and refuses to collapse just to be loved. And here's the truth that changes everything. The wrong women stop choosing you when you stop living at their level. They can't attach to a man who is grounded. They can't manipulate a man who is self-aware. They can't destabilize a man who understands his value. They can't pull you into games when you no longer respond to them. You become immune to the patterns that once controlled you. The more you grow, the more your environment shifts. You attract peace because you've become peaceful. You attract maturity because you've become mature. You attract loyalty because you've become loyal to yourself. You attract women who match your evolution instead of reflecting your old wounds. And that is the ultimate transformation. You stop searching for the right woman and start becoming the man who naturally aligns with her. You stop hoping for better and start building better within yourself. You stop repeating cycles because you've outgrown the version of you that created them. When you rise, your relationships rise with you, and from that moment forward, choosing the right woman is no longer a challenge. It becomes the only option your new identity allows. Nothing transforms your life more powerfully than realizing you are no longer driven by who you were, but by who you are becoming. And when you reach that point, you begin to understand that choosing the right woman is not just about relationships, it's about identity. It's about stepping into a version of yourself who refuses to betray his own growth. A version of yourself who would rather stand alone in truth than stay attached to someone who keeps him small. A version of yourself who no longer views love as something to chase, but something to align with. You become a man who sees himself clearly, and that clarity becomes your shield. You no longer measure your worth through someone else's approval. You no longer seek meaning in someone else's presence. You no longer bend your life around someone who has not earned the right to shape your world. You begin moving with a different kind of confidence, quiet, steady, grounded, the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can walk away from anything that threatens your peace, no matter how tempting it feels in the moment. This is the power that keeps you from falling for the wrong women ever again, because when you know yourself deeply, the illusions that once drew you in lose their magic. A woman who plays games no longer pulls you in. A woman who tests you no longer impresses you. A woman who thrives on attention no longer distracts you. You recognize these patterns instantly, not because you're bitter, but because you've outgrown the emotional immaturity required to entertain them. Growth sharpens your vision. Strength protects your heart. And the truth is, the right woman doesn't require you to abandon your identity. She doesn't require you to shrink your voice, your purpose, or your mission. She fits into your life without forcing you to lose yourself. She respects the man you are becoming, not the wounds you are trying to escape. She challenges you without belittling you. She supports you without smothering you. She grows with you, not around you. And the only reason you're able to choose her is because you built yourself into a man who can recognize the difference. Your transformation becomes the filter. Your discipline becomes the boundary. Your purpose becomes the foundation. Your healing becomes the compass that points you toward people who match your energy, not those who drain it. You stop choosing based on fear. You stop choosing based on loneliness. You stop choosing based on temporary emotion. You start choosing based on vision, alignment, and truth. And the most powerful part of this entire shift is realizing you are now the kind of man who attracts a relationship built on depth instead of drama. A relationship built on mutual respect instead of emotional volatility. A relationship built on honesty, stability, and shared values. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. You no longer need intensity to feel connected. You no longer need to lose yourself to feel loved. You finally understand that the love you accept will always match the love you have for yourself. So you raise your standards not out of pride, but out of wisdom. You elevate your life not to impress others, but to honor yourself. And you walk forward with the quiet confidence of a man who refuses to settle for anything that takes him backwards. This is where the cycle ends. This is where your new life begins. You are no longer the man who chooses the wrong women. You are the man who chooses himself first. And because of that, everything you attract from this moment forward will rise to meet the strength you finally claimed.